I got everything in here. It's the bed is not mounted on the stand yet, but I'm going to be getting rid of my old lathe. This Powermatic right now is gray, but its original color was the pea green style. I just sanded it a little bit off. It looks like it was a couple different colors. It almost looks like there was like a yellowish green in here at one point. Unfortunately, the previous owner of this did not take care of it. The history of this lathe was at a VoTech school, and then the shop teacher got it, and he painted the entire thing gray, and he painted over all the tags. This knob is supposed to be chrome, and it's no longer chrome. It's a three-phase lathe, and I'm going to keep it three-phase, but I got a phase converter to convert it to single-phase power. The original horsepower was 1, but I'm going to up that to a 3. I also have a whole bunch of accessories. Face plates, live centers, drive centers, chucks. These are the hand wheel face plates that go on the outside. 3 banjos. Like 10 tool rests, like 10 face plates. A large chuck. And unfortunately, I haven't taken the best of care of it either. It's been sitting in an old barn we have, and it's a lot of the stuff is rusted. But all that can be cleaned up. There's no pitting, so I'm going to do the best job I can to try to sand out some of this paint, and I don't think I'm going to strip it down. That paint he used was, I'm assuming, pretty good stuff, because it's taken a while just to do that. I guess I could go down to a lower grit. I believe this lathe is around a 1959. I think about that year Powermatic changed from pea green, or from gray to pea green. And some of the hints that this lathe will give you is, number one, the headstock. If I can get around here. It's got the old style headstock. It starts at 1,000 RPM and it goes to 4,000. That's hint number 1. Hint number 2 is that there are motor mounts in the bed of the lathe. I don't know if you can see it real well, but these 2 bars are for the motor mount. And the last hint is on the bolts that mount the bed to the lathe. Mount the bed to the stand come up through the bottom of the stand. They do not, the newer ones have a little bump out here and that goes down into the stand, which is a little bit better of a design, because this one's a little tricky just to get all the bolts in. You can see he painted over that tag. No idea what that means. I got the headstock taken off. There's just 2 bolts underneath it. It's got the same clamping mechanism as the tool rest and the tailstock. If I can wiggle myself around here. This is the remnants of the electrical component. There's a little switch up in here. Looks like it's all taped up, and I gotta figure out how all this works. And I'm gonna see if I can't look into the bearings and see how the bearings are. The threading on the spindle is a little bit junky. There's a big bolt in the middle, and I'm assuming that takes off this outer wheel that shows you the speed. Spring loaded. Glad to see no rust on that. Nothing exploded. It looks like this must ride against a bearing. I'm assuming so. It kind of looks like a bearing and it's frozen. Okay, so that brings out everything. So this whole thing just must be held in with this rim, and it just sits in there. So this is how a variable frequency drive works on a Powermatic 90. Do you see this little bearing? It rides against this groove, and this groove is spiral shaped. So whenever it turns, it pushes against this bearing, pushing the sleeve apart, as you can see right there. So whenever you adjust it, it adjusts the belt, and the belt sinks down into these cone-shaped. I need to get this off, and I got the set screws undone, but it's loose. But does not want to go. I'm at day 2 of trying to get this thing off. It still does not want to come off. I found a manual online that's recommended saying that it threaded off. Well, I don't know. See what happens. It's hot. I got it. Look at that. I found the problem. Look at those boogered up threads. And I got everything set up for paint. I got the sanding all done. Looks like somebody did a very bad camo job. Made a little jig for all the tool rests. So far the paint scheme is going to be a little bit different than what the typical Powermatic is. I think from 60s to 70s and up, there is a white stripe that goes around this side of the cabinet. And I'm going to do that, but the base color will be Rustoleum hammered gray, and the stripes are going to be black. I haven't seen it done like this, so I thought I'd try it. I kind of like the gray look. And then for some accents, the Powermatic letters will be gray, the bed will be gray, but the background will be black. Tool rests will all be gray. This last curved tool rest is actually a Craftsman. I'm going to modify it to fit this. Faceplates will all be black. There is an inner ring that goes here. That's going to be black. The rest will be gray on the headstock. I might end up painting these faces black. We'll see what happens. The lettering on the hand wheel there will be black, accented with a gray background. And I'll probably have a black knob on it. I've got a few coats of paint on everything for the base coat, and I still need to do the detailings. So on that dial, doing the detailing all those numbers in black. I got my motor off the dust collector. And this is going, I've repainted it black. It's 3 horsepower, 3-phase. I don't have 3-phase power, but I've got a 3-phase converter that'll take a single-phase input, convert it to 3-phase. I've got the bed all painted up. I've got the stripes laid out. I've got a wrap around the back here with the 2 smaller stripes. And you can see I have the black coat on for the base for the stripes. And that'll paint over everything and with the silver. I never understood why Powermatic did this, but they never did the left side of the base. They never did the stripes on it. It was only on the right. Don't know why, but they did. On the corners here, I'm going to take a block of wood. It's about a 1/2 inch wide, I think. I'm going to mark that, peel the tape off, and then cut it along that line. Then lay it back down so it'll be gray. In the middle here, the stripes will stop about a 1/2 inch from the sheet metal that's angled. The next thing that I need to do is to somehow figure out a mount for this new motor. The whole reason I'm doing a larger motor is because I plan on putting riser blocks on the lathe and turning the 12-inch turning capacity into like a 20 or 24. This motor is much bigger than the original spot for the motor. This motor is about as tall as the cast iron bed. And unfortunately that it's so large, it won't fit in the stand, or at least from the shelf up. I can mount it down below, but that means cutting a hole in the shelf. But I still want to use this as storage. So I'm kind of out of options there for mounting the motor. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is on the back here utilize the original motor mounts, but the motor's going to sit on the back side of the lathe with the shaft coming out on this end, coming to 2 pulleys over to a jack shaft, and then on the jack shaft I'd then have the original pulley coming up running to the headstock. I'm going to take the original, I'm still keeping the mechanical variable speed. I want to have mechanical and electronic. But the original Reeves drive will now sit backwards. At least that's the plan. That way I can conserve space when mounting this, because I don't want, the motor and stuff to be sticking real far out. I want it to be fairly compact in here. But I have to keep the Reeves drive in the same plane as the headstock. So I need to come up with 2 mounts, one for the motor and then one for the jack shaft. I have belts and pulleys coming from, or pulleys and shafts and bearings coming from the surplus center. And those should be coming within the coming days. Time for the moment of truth. I think the stripes turned out very nice. On the front, end on the back. Unfortunately, with the added layers of paint, I cannot close this door. So that's kind of a bummer. And I think the Powermatic insignia turned out pretty nice too. I also did some smaller details, such as the pulleys, the outside sheaves are painted black, while the inside are still steel. Black tailstock lock knob, and the lock for the door I busted. So I'll probably take that off and make a wooden one. And I also detailed the variable speed knob, black handle, and the either side of where that knob goes. If I ever tear apart the inside, or if I find out the bearings are junk, or if I make them junk, I'll repaint the inside. There's too many nooks and crannies now, it's not going to look good if I do it. And someone hobbled together that wiring for the switch. I'll spend some time on that. Probably over the summer I'm going to build or cast my own belt guard, being that this one's no longer going to fit. I'm going to have it come out to the side and back up where the motor will be sitting in the back. Yeah, I really like those stripes. So since painting this, I have found that this bedway here is cracked. Goes all the way through into the backside. And I'm going to try to fix it by drilling a hole through it and then welding the crack back together. I'm going to go all the way around if I can. Unfortunately, I'm going to mess up a little bit of my paint, but that's what happens whenever you notice things afterwards. I didn't notice that. I've got the hole drilled, and the next step is to carve a V-groove for the weld so you can fill it in. Because if it's flat, you're not going to get a decent weld. I got my hand wheel in the mail. And now I just got to drill a hole for the 1/2-inch threads for the tailstock. And then unfortunately they didn't tap a set screw in it anywhere. So I gotta drill that as well. Come to me. There you go. Turn it up.
You're gonna have to come.
Now that I got most everything together, I'm going to take some sandpaper and sand some of the gunk down on the bedways. They're old and kind of rough looking, so I'm just going to sand them, see if I can't get a nice shine out of them. So unfortunately, these threads here are all boogered up, and it's very difficult to get the collar that's supposed to go on here that holds the one Reeves drive sheave. So I'm going to take a file. This comes down to a point on the end. I'm going to see if I can't maybe file any of it down. It's kind of close to the pitch on the threading, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so at this point in time, it has been 3 months since I have done anything on the lathe and recorded any video. So I've come up with a control panel that controls the variable frequency drive, the on-off for the motor, the speed for the motor, and the forward and reverse, as well as a digital readout and some indicator lights. The first one here, the green one, will tell me if the variable frequency drive is on, and the red one will tell me if it is in reverse. But unfortunately, with the different voltages, this is a 12 volt light running on a 5 volt system, so it's a little dim right now. I need to edit that. But to turn on the lathe, you push the first stop switch. You'll see a green light come on with the digital readout. And you can adjust the potentiometer to whatever speed you want. And then you'll hear the lathe running. The stop switch wherever you want. You can also change directions too. This is just a wooden frame I made out of oak and then some steel I got from the side of a washer and dryer. And then this potentiometer plate, I think came from a guitar. I bought it off of eBay for a couple dollars. And then to turn off the variable frequency drive, just hit the stop switch. You'll see the light will turn off. And once the drive stops, this indicator will stop as well. So here's the jack shaft assembly. It is a piece of 5/8 inch shafting with 2 pillow block bearings and another pulley that takes a drive unit over to the motor. And then from there, it heads up to the spindle. And this is the original drive assembly. I just modified it with this custom bracket that I'll probably end up changing in a little bit. It's not quite what I want, but it's functional at least now. Unfortunately, this lathe was not taken care of, and this side of this sheave will wobble, and it creates some vibrations, and I want to true it up maybe, and maybe put a shim in there to prevent that, so whenever the set screw locks down, you can see that it is at an angle right there, and it pushes the sheave to one side, twists it. So whenever I turn the lathe on here, you'll see the whole thing wobbling. The original Reeves drive still functions. I have also tapped a spot for the set screw to go in the handle. And I worked on this a little bit to get it running a little bit smoother. It's not quite perfect. There's still a little bit of friction in there once I send the quill out a little bit more. That's just the tailstock wobbling on the base. I don't have it anchored. I need to get a new threaded rod for the lock mechanism. Unfortunately, all the threads have been mashed over and they're worn out, and I just need to get a new one. The hard part on the handle is coming back. What I might end up doing is put a little thrust bearing on between the hand wheel and the tailstock. That way it can rotate and it's not pushing against the hand wheel nearly as much, so there isn't as much friction. Well, I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. You guys have been great. I'm almost hitting up to 2,000 subscribers. I have more videos planned and more projects planned, but the hard part for me now is trying to find the time during the semesters. It's hard to find any time to breathe. I want to ask you guys to please subscribe, like me on Facebook, follow me on Google+, and stay tuned for the next video.